All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into Cloud CDN using some excerpts from Google Cloud's official documentation, and I think it's going to be a really interesting one.
Oh, yeah? This is going to be a good one.
I think everybody listening already knows how frustrating it is to have to wait for a website to load
Right.
when you're on the go, especially. So we're going to explore Cloud CDN and how it helps make sure your website is delivering content blazing fast
hmm
to users anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's all about creating a smooth and seamless experience for those users. You've put so much work into your website. You want people to enjoy using it.
Right. We've all been there just waiting for a page to load and then we just give up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does Cloud CDN actually work its magic?
Well, so think of it this way. Cloud CDN is like having a network of super fast servers strategically placed all over the globe. So when someone tries to access your website, that request is automatically routed to the server that is closest to them.
So instead of all that traffic having to go back to my main server no matter where the user is, it's like having these little outposts all over the place ready to deliver the content.
Exactly. And that's where caching comes in. These servers, or points of presence as they're called, they store copies of your website's content, like images, videos, even entire web pages. So when a user requests that content, it can be delivered almost instantly from the nearest point of presence.
Okay, so caching is key here,
Right.
but how does the CDN know what to store in those caches?
Well, that's where the Google front end, or GFE, comes into play. The GFE is like the brain of the whole operation, deciding whether to serve content directly from the cache or fetch it from your main server, which is called the origin server.
So every time someone visits my website, the GFE is making this split-second decision, save it from the cache or go back to the origin server.
Precisely. And the goal is to serve as much content as possible from the cache, because that's what gives you the blazing fast loading times.
Okay, I see. So is there a way to measure how well the CDN is doing at serving content from the cache?
Absolutely. That's where the cache hit ratio comes in. It's basically a percentage that tells you how often requests are successfully fulfilled from the cache.
So a higher cache hit ratio means happier users because my site's loading faster. And that means more engagement, people spending more time on the site, maybe even more conversions or sales.
Exactly. It's a win-win for both you and your users.
This is fascinating. So we want to keep that cache hit ratio as high as possible. But what happens when the content on my website changes? Does the CDN automatically know to update that cache content?
Not always. Sometimes you need to give the CDN a little nudge to refresh its memory, which is where cache invalidation comes in.
Cache invalidation. So it's like hitting the refresh button on the cached content.
Exactly. It's a way to tell the CDN, hey, this content has been updated, so go ahead and fetch the latest version from the origin server.
That makes sense. I wouldn't want users to be seeing outdated content. Now, I've heard about something called byte range requests in relation to Cloud CDN. What is that all about?
Okay, so think about how annoying it is when you're trying to watch a video online and you have to wait for the entire thing to buffer, even if you just want to skip ahead to a particular part.
Oh, I hate that, especially when I'm on a slow connection.
Well, byte range requests eliminate that frustration. With Cloud CDN, you can request and download only the specific portions of a file that you need.
So if I want to skip ahead to the middle of a video, I only download that portion, not the whole thing. That's brilliant. It must save a ton of time and bandwidth.
It absolutely does. It's one of those little details that can make a huge difference in the user experience. And speaking of user experience, security is another crucial aspect of Cloud CDN.
Right, because we don't want any of that content falling into the wrong hands, especially if it's sensitive information. So how does Cloud CDN handle security?
Well, Google takes security very seriously. Cloud CDN automatically uses Google-managed SSL certificates, which encrypt the connection between the user and the CDN.
So it's like having a secure tunnel for the data to travel through.
Exactly. It prevents eavesdropping and tampering, ensuring that the content reaches the user safely and securely. Plus, you can integrate Cloud CDN with Google Cloud Armor for an extra layer of protection.
Cloud Armor, is that like a virtual bodyguard for my website?
You could say that. It's a powerful tool that helps you protect your website from attacks, like DDoS attacks and other malicious traffic.
So Cloud CDN isn't just about speed, it's also about keeping my content and my users safe. This is great. I feel like I'm already getting a much clearer understanding of how Cloud CDN works and why it matters, but I'm sure there's still more to learn, right?
Oh, absolutely. We've just
Well,
scratched the surface. Next, let's talk about those cache modes you mentioned earlier. Those give you even more control over how your content is cached and delivered.
Okay, let's do it. I'm ready to go deeper. Okay, So we've talked about caching and cache hit ratio. Those are crucial for speeding up content delivery. But you mentioned something called cache modes that give you even more control. I'm curious, what exactly are those and why would I need them?
Well, think of cache modes as different strategies for managing your content in the CDN's caches. They give you the power to fine-tune how caching works for different types of content on your website.
So it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach. There's actually some flexibility.
Absolutely. Cloud CDN offers three main cache modes: Cacheal Static, User Agent Headers, and Force Cacheal.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the deal with Cacheal Static?
This mode is all about efficiency. It tells Cloud CDN to cache all the static content on your website, things like images, CSS files, and JavaScript files.
That makes sense. Those are things that don't change very often, so it's safe to store them in the cache for a long time.
Exactly. And since static content often makes up a large portion of a website's size, caching it effectively can significantly improve loading times. It's generally the default mode and a good starting point for most websites.
What about user origin headers? What's that all about?
With this mode, Cloud CDN plays by the rules set by your origin server. It looks at the HTTP headers sent by your server to determine whether or not a piece of content can be cached and for how long.
So it's basically letting my origin server dictate the caching strategy.
Precisely. This gives you more granular control over how individual files are cached, but it also requires more careful configuration on your server.
I see. And then we have force cacheal, which I'm guessing is the most aggressive approach.
You could say that. Force Cacheal tells Cloud CDN to cache everything, even dynamic content that might change frequently.
But wouldn't that be risky? What if I'm caching things like personalized recommendations or real-time stock prices? I wouldn't want users to see outdated information.
You're absolutely right. Force Cacheal can be a powerful tool, but you need to use it with caution. It's best suited for situations where you need absolute maximum performance and you're confident that the cache content won't become stale quickly.
So it's like a turbo boost for caching, but you need to be careful not to overheat the engine.
A perfect analogy. Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about security again. We touched on SSL certificates, but what about access control? What if I have some content that I only want certain users to see?
Yeah, that's important. For example, what if I have a members-only area on my website with premium content?
Cloud CDN has you covered. You can use signed URLs or signed cookies to restrict access to specific content.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the difference between the two?
Think of a signed URL as a temporary access pass with an expiration date. You can generate a unique URL that grants access to a specific piece of content, but that URL only works for a limited time.
So it's like giving someone a key to a room, but that key only works for a certain number of hours.
Exactly. It's perfect for things like pay-per-view videos or downloadable files that you want to protect from unauthorized access.
And what about signed cookies? How do those work?
Signed cookies are similar, but instead of embedding the authorization information directly in the URL, it's stored in a cookie on the user's browser.
So once a user has the signed cookie, they can access the protected content multiple times without needing a new signed URL each time.
Precisely. It's a more convenient option for things like member-only areas of a website, where users need ongoing access.
Okay, so signed URLs are like temporary passes, and signed cookies are like membership cards. I'm starting to see how all these security features can work together to create a really robust system.
It's all about layering those security measures to ensure that your content is protected and only accessible to authorized users. And speaking of keeping things running smoothly, let's move on to the topic of monitoring and troubleshooting. Even with a system as sophisticated as Cloud CDN, things can sometimes go wrong, right?
You're absolutely right. No system is perfect. So how do we keep tabs on our Cloud CDN and make sure everything is running smoothly? What do we do if things start to go sideways? So we've got our Cloud CDN humming along, but we need to make sure it stays that way. What tools do we have for monitoring its performance and catching any potential hiccups, before they become major headaches?
Yeah, you're thinking like a true CDN pro. Google Cloud provides a really powerful suite of monitoring tools. Think of them as your CDN control panel, giving you real-time visibility into how things are performing.
Okay, I like the sound of that. What kind of things can we track with these tools?
Well, first off, you can keep a close eye on that cache hit ratio we talked about earlier. Remember, a high hit ratio means content is being served quickly from the cache, which is what we want.
Right, because that translates to faster loading times for users. What else should we be watching?
Latency is another crucial metric. That tells you how long it takes for content to travel from the CDN to the user's device.
So low latency is good, high latency is bad. Pretty straightforward. Anything else?
You also want to monitor error rates. A sudden spike in errors could signal a problem with your CDN configuration, or your origin server, or even a potential security issue.
Got it. Cache hit ratio latency and error rates, those are the big three. What happens if we spot something fishy in the data? How do we actually troubleshoot these issues?
That's where logging comes into play. Cloud CDN keeps detailed logs of every request that flows through the system. It's like having a black box recorder for your CDN.
So it's like a trail of breadcrumbs that we can follow to pinpoint the source of a problem.
Exactly. You can filter these logs by all sorts of parameters, like time, URL, IP address, and status codes to zero in on the culprit.
This is sounding a bit like detective work, but for my CDN.
It can be, but Google Cloud makes it a lot easier with some really slick visualization tools. Tools like cloud monitoring and cloud logging can help you analyze those logs, spot trends, identify anomalies, and basically get a much deeper understanding of what's going on under the hood.
So we have the raw data from the logs, and then we can use these tools to make sense of it all, create charts and graphs, and really see the bigger picture.
It's all about leveraging the power of data to optimize your CDN's performance and address any potential issues before they impact your users.
This has been a fantastic deep dive. I feel like I've gone from CDN newbie to having a pretty solid grasp of how it all works. Any parting words of wisdom for our listeners as they embark on their own cloud CDN journeys?
Well, Cloud CDN is an incredibly powerful tool, but like any tool, it's most effective when you understand how to use it properly. Don't be afraid to experiment with different configurations, cache modes, and invalidation techniques to find what works best for your specific needs.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot between performance, security, and control.
Exactly. And remember, Google Cloud's documentation is a treasure trove of information. They're constantly updating it with the latest features, best practices, and tips and tricks. It's your go-to resource for anything and everything Cloud CDN.
Well said. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the key takeaway is that Cloud CDN is much more than just a way to speed up your website. It's about creating a better, faster, and more secure online experience for your users, no matter where they are in the world.
Absolutely. And in today's digital landscape where speed and reliability are paramount, that can make all the difference in the world.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Cloud CDN. We hope you found it informative and empowering. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the digital realm.